And good evening. Is America barreling towards a recession? That seems to be the concern on Wall Street. The Dow Jones sinking 700 points, dropping back below 30,000, its lowest level since January of 2021. The S&P and Nasdaq also slipping, both now in bear market territory, weighing heavily on investors. The country's rampant inflation, of course. Today's slump coming one day after the Federal Reserve announced its largest rate increase in decades in an effort to get rising prices somehow under control. President Biden also attempting to ease fears today, telling the AP in a new interview that a recession is, quote, not inevitable. So do experts agree with the president's? Tonight, we're going to find out. Joining us right now is senior CNBC analyst Ron Insana. So, Ron, Wall Street rallied after the Fed's announcement yesterday. We always like to remind viewers, Wall Street likes to say they sort of predict the future. But now the Nasdaq and the S&P are in bear market territory. What changed today?
Well, I don't know how much really changed, Tom, in the sense that we've been selling off all year long. We've been down 10 of the last 11 weeks. And I think we're at a be careful what you wish for moment as far as the Federal Reserve is concerned. We've been pushing, not me, academics, others have been suggesting the Fed needs to be more aggressive in raising interest rates to quell inflation. And today the switch kind of flipped. We saw that jobless claims rose a bit. We saw housing starts down 14%. Last month, retail sales went into negative territory. We're starting to see the market shift its worries from inflation to recession. And while I agree with the president that it may not be inevitable that we'll have one, it's becoming increasingly likely that we're going to see a slowdown that may well turn in by the end of the year, if not sooner, into a recession. So
Ron, on that point, how bad is it going to be, right? A lot of people watching this remember the Great Recession. It wasn't that too long ago. I know you and others, I think you and others don't think we're headed that way, but more and more people say a recession is coming and it could come sooner than people think.
Yeah, so remember the great financial crisis had a wide variety of different of factors that caused it. We had a systemic financial crisis that came from an enormous amount of leverage in the housing market. Housing became a speculative asset in which we had a massive national bubble. And when it crashed, it took the whole economy with it. This is a different set of operating circumstances. A lot of the inflation, and again, I argue with academics about this all the time, is from the restrictions of supply of both raw materials and manufactured goods. China's shutdown, the war in Ukraine, the after effects of the pandemic. Those things are still with us. The Federal Reserve is trying to tamp down inflation, but at the end of the day, the banking system's not in nearly as bad a shape as it was in 2006, 2007, going into 2008. And it's a different set of principles, really, and factors that are affecting the economy. So I don't know exactly what kind of recession we'll have. It may be short and shallow. The Federal Reserve would have to change policy for that to be true, stop raising rates, and maybe even start cutting them if we see real weakness here at home, or, which is also a consideration, if we start to see problems crop up elsewhere in the world as a result of not just Fed policy, but other central bank policies around the globe, that could put a pause in the Fed's rate hiking cycle.
Ron, I want you to remind our viewers, what will a recession bring? Job losses, higher prices? It shouldn't be a word that we throw around loosely,
Yeah, I mean, there's a technical definition for it, Thomas, which is 2 quarters of negative economic growth, the contraction in GDP. Now, of course, in the first quarter, we saw that the economy did, in fact, contract, but it was somewhat more technical in nature in the way in which the number is calculated. Second quarter expectations are now for really zero growth. But a real recession pushes up the unemployment rate. You see job losses, and you see some real weakness in select industries. We haven't fully seen that yet. There is some risk, for instance, that travel come the fall may drop off, or that we'll see a pullback in manufacturing, not only because input costs are high, but demand starts to slow down. The Federal Reserve, by the way, is trying to engineer something we call in the business demand destruction. They're trying to slow the pace of growth so that prices fall, economic activity goes not necessarily into reverse, but certainly softens up a bit to take those price pressures out of the system. If they go too far raising rates, that could quite easily turn into a recession.
All right, Ron Insana leading us off tonight. Ron, we thank you for that. We want to move on now to our other big story of the day, the January 6th committee revealing new details about the danger Vice President Pence was in the day of the attack on the Capitol and the White House's effort to convince Pence to reject the results of the 2020 election. Garrett Hake now with the latest for us.
Tonight, the January 6th committee presenting new evidence of what was happening behind the scenes as the mob surged into the Capitol. What they say is a culmination of a failed pressure campaign by former President Trump designed to force Mike Pence to overturn the election results. In newly revealed testimony, close aides and advisors detailing a private phone call between the president and vice president the morning of the 6th.
The conversation was pretty heated.
I remember hearing the word wimp. Either he called him a wimp. I don't remember if he said, "You are a wimp."
Like me, you're not tough enough to make the call.
It was a different tone than I'd heard him take with the vice president before.
Do you remember what she said her father called him?
The P word.
But Pence, relying on advice from his legal team and on his faith, stayed firm, even after coming within 40 feet of the rioters.
He resisted the pressure. He knew it was illegal. He knew it was wrong. We're fortunate for Mr. Pence's courage on January 6th. Our democracy came dangerously close to catastrophe.
Pence was evacuated to a safe location deep beneath the Capitol. These never-before-seen pictures showing the vice president making calls to Pentagon officials and congressional leaders, working through the attack and refusing to leave the Capitol.
The vice president did not want to take any chance that the world would see the vice president of the United States fleeing the United States Capitol. He was determined that we would complete the work that we had set out to do that day.
The committee says the plan to have Pence reject the election results began with a lawyer named John Eastman, who witnesses say knew the idea was illegal and unconstitutional, and who later requested a presidential pardon.
I said, "Are you out of your effing mind?" I said, "You're completely crazy." I said, "You're going to turn around and tell 78+ million people in this country that your theory is this is how you're going to invalidate their votes because you think the election was stolen?" And I said, "They're not going to tolerate that." I said, "You're going to cause riots in the streets."
I assert my Fifth Amendment right.
Eastman repeatedly pled the Fifth when questioned by the committee. Republicans continuing to pan the proceedings as a distraction.
We've got record inflation, soaring gas prices. What are they focused on? What gets their primetime billing? It is their seething hatred for Donald Trump and anybody who's ever supported him.
All right, with that, Garrett Haake joins us now live from Washington. Garrett, I know you have some new information about Ginny Thomas, of course, the wife of our Supreme Court Justice, and her role in the effort to overturn the 2020 election results.
Yeah, that's right, Tom. The committee says they have invited Ginny Thomas, who is a professional conservative activist, in addition to being the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, to come testify. This came after the Washington Post reported that Thomas was corresponding with John Eastman about those election results. Thomas, for her part, gave a comment to the Daily Caller. She said she's happy to come in and clear up any misconceptions, but this is not the first time she's been caught up in all of this. Remember, there were text messages released between her and Mark Meadows several months ago. The committee's got a lot of questions for her about, what she knew, what and when about this plot related to January 6th.
Garrett, it may be too early for this question because we don't have all the evidence in front of us yet, but what's the sense on this move? Because we know the January 6th committee has put out a lot of new evidence, a lot of new videos. They've also thrown some red meat out there for headlines and whatnot. We know Ginny Thomas is a citizen. She is married to a very powerful person, a Supreme Court justice. Do we think there were crimes committed here? Could she be in trouble?
I think that's unlikely, Tom. The committee's view had long been that she was not a central figure in all of this, but the reporting that kept pushing this story forward, particularly her correspondence with John Eastman, seems to have forced the committee's hand here a little bit. It's also concerns more about perhaps any firewalls, any internal red lines being crossed ethically between she and her husband's work. Of course, Clarence Thomas has already ruled on some 2020-related cases, could be forced to rule on other election-related cases. What have they discussed about the election? All of those are topics of interest to the committee, but in terms of crimes committed, there's been no evidence presented to suggest that at this point.
Garrett Haake for us tonight. Garrett, we thank you for that. For more on this blockbuster day of evidence and testimony, I want to bring in former U.S. Secret Service special agent and author of Becoming Bulletproof, Evie Poumpouras. Evie, we thank you for joining Top Story tonight. We really do. I want to show the video, and I want you to look at this video from January 6th at the Capitol, some of the riot video. These are some of the images right here, some of the stills. My only question for you, having been a Secret Service agent, after looking at these people, seeing what was in their eyes, if they would have gotten to Mike Pence, do you think they would have hurt him?
I would say yes, because people are caught up in the moment. They are enraged. They are feeling the emotions of it, and people aren't thinking clearly. Clearly, they're not thinking clearly because they invaded the Capitol. So you're getting this rush of momentum. It was way too close of a situation. You are outnumbered. And that's one of the first things you think of. How many assets do I have and resources do I have? And then how many people are out there? And then the other thing is, are you going to start shooting civilians? Because that's what you're dealing with. And where is that green light to say, is this okay to shoot this person or not shoot this person? I think in an environment like this, you have to really look at the whole context and prepare. You have to be proactive and not let something get so close. We're talking about 40 feet. 40 feet is way too close. I understand the principle of it. I don't want to be seen fleeing the Capitol, right? Those were the vice president's words. But if we're looking at it from a purely security perspective, he is not the person to listen to.
Were there enough agents? Could they have held off the mob if the mob came after Vice President Pence?
You would have needed a lot more, not just agents, but Capitol Police. And Capitol Police were dealing with the mob. You were extremely outnumbered.
So you have that situation. And again, I just want to make sure we're clear here. You do think the mob, if they would have gotten to Mike Pence, it would have gotten very ugly.
Absolutely.
You also have this case in the parking lot where we saw those images of Mike Pence on the phone, and we learned that he was in communications with his agents, but saying, I don't want to go. And to you, that is strange, right? Because when the Secret Service says we need to go, the protectee has to go.
So here's the thing. Every detail has a detail leader, and that detail leader has a certain relationship with their protectee. And sometimes there are subjective decisions that are made depending on your relationship. So I would argue, though, at this point, you're the specialist. You're the one with the security background. You know what you can and can't handle. And yes, this is a scenario where you would absolutely say, sir, I'm in charge in this moment. It is not safe. We cannot shield you and protect you. Here's the other thing. If the vice president is staying, guess what everybody else around him is doing? Well, if Secret Service is staying and he's staying, then I should stay. So think about all the other lives that it echoes into or kind of ripples into that are staying behind because they think it's a safe environment.
Finally, and I think this might have been a first ever for the Secret Service, if everything that is being put out is completely true, you know, there's a situation where you have Mark Short, who works with the vice president, and he contacts the lead Secret Service agent prior to people invading the Capitol saying, we think the president is going to publicly bash the vice president, right? Yeah. So you have two groups that are protecting each other. Have you ever known of a situation like that in history where the Secret Service is protecting a vice president and their own staff is worried that the actions of the president are going to endanger that person's life?
No, in my experience, I can say I've never dealt or seen or know of a situation like that.
What is the move there?
The move there is to make sure, I'll tell you this, I don't think they foresaw this. Nobody foresaw this. They're thinking, okay, it's a verbal dialogue. They're not thinking that it's going to lead to all this stuff. That's the scenario you're dealing with. But again, I think what his staff did, and that's really not that uncommon because staff always communicates with the security team and always says, we're vulnerable here, we're worried about this. That's not off. I think what's off is where the concern's coming from, which was the president of the United States.
If you could have been with Vice President Mike Pence on that day, what would you have told him?
We're going. We're going, sir. This is not a decision. You also have to think about the other people that are here that are staying as a result of you staying behind as well, right? We're not just worried about his life, but the other lives in danger, and it does put other people at risk.
All right. Former U.S. Secret Service agent Evie Pompouris, we thank you so much for joining Top Story tonight. All right, we want to turn to another big story. We're following the severe weather impacting much of the country. Millions of Americans still under alert for dangerous heat, and several states now bracing for more summer storms. Flooding also halting production at an Abbott baby formula plant in Michigan. The facility reopening just over a week ago after a months-long closure that fueled that formula shortage, you'll remember. And all of the entrances to Yellowstone National Park remain closed after historic rainfall. Miguel Almaguer is there.
Tonight, with 81 million Americans broiling in record and deadly heat, states like Kansas and Ohio feel like an oven. In the Midwest, a double threat: excessive heat and damaging tornadoes carving through Wisconsin.
Hey boys, we got a tornado, let's go!
While extreme weather has moved out of Montana, the disaster here is still far from over. There are literally bridges to nowhere and a multi-million, if not billion-dollar cleanup.
New video of flooded roads into a washed-out Yellowstone show mass devastation.
This is a historic event, a 1,000-year event.
Because some entrances into America's oldest national park could be impassable for months. Today, the only way we could reach the park's superintendent was by Zoom.
There are a lot of things to do, not only in Yellowstone, but also outside of Yellowstone, our gateway communities. But it is going to look a little different when it comes to figuring out how to manage visitation in only half of the park.
Hoping to reopen Yellowstone's south entrance within weeks, a limited number of visitors could be allowed in to see Old Faithful, the stunning majestic meadows, and perhaps catch a glimpse of the free-roaming bison, all unimpacted by the floods.
You should receive an email pretty quickly confirming that cancellation.
But for businesses like Paradise Adventure Company, dependent on the nearly 1 million summer tourists who visit Yellowstone every month, the floods could sink their bottom line.
I love our town, and I love my staff, and I don't have jobs for them right now. It's really hard.
Tonight, one disaster has passed, but another, perhaps even more devastating, could lie ahead.
When Yellowstone reopens, access will be limited to smaller crowds. The flooding here just before summer couldn't have happened at a worse time. Tom?
All right, Miguel, we thank you for that. A lot of weather headlines tonight, so let's get right to our guy, meteorologist Bill Cairns. Bill, walk us through what's happening across the country.
Yeah, we're still dealing with an impressive heat, and this heat wave that's relentless, and it's actually going to get worse next week. And then, of course, we have severe weather that we've been dealing with all afternoon and evening. So it feels like 108 in Kansas City. So the heat was in the south. It still is, actually. It still feels like 101 in Atlanta, 106 Tallahassee. But now the heat is going to start building towards the middle of the country as we head towards the weekend. We still have millions of people. Right now, the current number is 72 million people under heat advisories or heat warnings. And these heat watches are already up here in the central portions of the plain. So the heat dome is building to the west. This is not the heat index. This is the actual temperature tomorrow. Everyone in the southeast, mid to upper 90s. Dallas hits 100 tomorrow. Even Denver gets the 96. And of course, we've been following the Yellowstone story. They were really cold and chilly. They're jumping up to 96 degrees in Billings. So it's going to be very warm there for that repair effort. And then the relief throughout the Midwest, a little bit here, especially Chicago, Cincinnati. You get a cool Saturday. Enjoy it while you can. Same with the Northeast, but the heat continues in the heartland, and it builds. And this is not a misprint. This is Fargo, North Dakota, 103 on Sunday. That is impressive by Fargo standards. And 2 days in a row could be over the 100 mark. All areas from Wichita to Tulsa to Dallas should easily be near 100 degrees. And as I've been mentioning, this doesn't end. This is all through the last week of June. It is hot. It is dry. We're quickly watching the drought get worse in those areas. And I want to show you the hail story in areas of central New York. Yes, this is like the hail you see, Tom, in like Oklahoma or Texas. This was just outside of Syracuse near the Finger Lakes. So severe weather is also on our mind this evening.
All right, Bill, we thank you for that. I want to turn now to politics and an update to a story we first brought you last night. Georgia Republican Senate candidate Herschel Walker now acknowledging he has 2 more children that he has not spoken about publicly. Walker has repeatedly stressed the problems of fatherless households. NBC's Maura Barrett has more.
Tonight, another bombshell for Georgia Senate candidate Herschel Walker. After initially admitting to having a child that was unknown to the public, it turns out Walker has 2 more children, according to the Daily Beast. The Republican speaks often on the issue of fatherless households, especially in the African-American community.
If you have a child with a woman, even if you have to leave that woman, you don't leave the child.
Right. The son that Walker publicly recognizes has joined him on the campaign trail. The bond they have is one Walker says he treasures.
I love this kid to death. Yeah.
Just 1 day after acknowledging having a second son, Walker released a new statement today about his additional kids, telling NBC News, "I have 4 children, 3 sons and a daughter. They're not undisclosed, they're my kids. I support them all and love them all. I've never denied my children. I confirmed this when I was appointed to the Presidential Council on Sports, Fitness, and Nutrition. I just chose not to use them as props to win a political campaign. What parent would want their child involved in garbage gutter politics like this?" While he does support all children financially, Walker has reportedly had no contact with his youngest son, aged 10. It is not known how much contact he has had with the 2 others, one 13-year-old and the other, a daughter he had while in college. The former football star has been endorsed by former President Trump and is in a hotly contested battle to unseat Democratic incumbent Raphael Warnock.
If Herschel Walker had come out and admitted to this or acknowledged that he had multiple children even before he got in the race or months ago, this wouldn't be the story it is now. But because we're in the general election cycle, because there is so much attention on this race, and because, frankly, it could once again decide to control the Senate, there is a lot of attention. There is not a negative scrutiny.
All right, Maura Barrett joins us now live from Washington. Maura, a second day of acknowledgments from Walker, but this isn't the only storyline that he's gotten ahead of. What else is plaguing his campaign right now?
Well, Tom, Walker insists that while he did not lie about his 4 children, he did make other false claims that have come up during this campaign. He falsely claimed that he had graduated from college and also worked in law enforcement in Georgia and for the FBI, all things that have not happened. And this was reported by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. The reporter there you heard from, Greg Bluestein, that we spoke with, said that this really hasn't dampened his campaign yet or affected his popularity, saying that this is still going to be, despite all of this drama, a very tight race for the Senate seat. Tom.
All right, we are back now with Oscar-winning actor Kevin Spacey making his first court appearance in London today over the 4 counts of sexual assault he stands accused of. NBC's Matt Bradley has more on the drama inside the courtroom.
Tonight, Kevin Spacey arriving to a swarm of cameras outside a UK court where he's charged with sexual abuse.
Keep moving!
Spacey smiling as he voluntarily made his first court appearance to fight charges formally brought against him Monday. Spacey made no comment, only speaking to confirm his name and London address. His lawyer telling the court Mr. Spacey strenuously denies any and all criminality in this case.
Step back. Step back.
A magistrate granting Spacey unconditional bail.
He will stand free until his trial.
The actor is facing 4 counts of sexual assault against 3 men in the United Kingdom after years of alleged sexual misconduct claims spanning from 2005 to 2013.
In the United Kingdom, there is no statute of limitations for criminal offenses. The prosecution or the Crown can actually bring these charges from the date of the incident until Mr. Spacey passes.
Prosecutors allege Spacey sexually assaulted a man twice in London in 2005. A third sexual assault charge comes from a 2008 incident, also in London, but with a more serious offense attached, causing a person to engage in penetrative sexual activity without consent. And the last count of sexual assault from 2013 in Gloucestershire. These claims are the latest to be criminally prosecuted in a cascade of allegations against Spacey. His career hit a wall starting in 2017 when Star Trek Discovery actor Anthony Rapp accused Spacey of making sexual advances in the 80s when Rapp was just 14. Spacey apologized and said he didn't remember the alleged incident, but Netflix cut ties with him despite his starring role in their hit show House of Cards.
I want to know who lied.
Last year, an arbitrator ordered Spacey to pay more than $30 million to the production company of the show for breach of contract. In 2018, Spacey was also charged for an alleged incident involving the teenage son of a former TV news anchor. The charge was withdrawn after the alleged victim dropped a civil lawsuit. Rapp's civil suit against Spacey is ongoing. A judge ruling last week that Spacey must stand trial in a New York federal court.
Keep in mind, with civil cases, the penalty is always compensation. And so he will not see any jail time if he loses on that case.
I know what you want. You want me back.
Amid all this, Spacey has been trying to rehabilitate his career, starring in a new movie that premiered at the Cannes Film Festival, but mostly posting YouTube videos in lieu of major films.
So we're not done, no matter what anyone says.
Yeah, Tom, legal experts say this trial could last more than a year, but the next time you'll see Kevin Spacey won't be here in front of the Westminster Magistrates Court. The next time that he's in court will be at the Southwark Crown Court. Now, that's not far from where I'm standing now, but it's a higher court. It's the kind that normally deals with cases like rapes and murders. Tom?
All right, we are back now with Top Stories newsfeed and the dramatic end to a police chase in Rochester, New York. Take a look at this video. It's home security cam footage. It captures the moment the vehicle goes airborne, rolling over several times before coming to a crashing stop. two people inside smashing through the front windshield and climbing out in an attempt to flee. Authorities say the chase started after the driver refused to pull over. A loaded rifle was found inside that car. Nearly a dozen people rescued off the coast of Tampa thanks to a group of Good Samaritans. Aerial footage shows several people, including children, swimming near a capsized boat. Another boat rushing to the scene and began lifting the victims to safety. A sheriff's Marine unit then helping two other people clinging to the boat. At least one person was taken to the hospital. And a consumer alert tonight. Ford is recalling nearly 3 million vehicles over risks they can roll away when parked. The recall covers several vehicles, including the Escape, the Fusion, and the Edge. The company says there's an issue with one of the parts that can stop the vehicles from shifting into the intended gear. At least 4 injuries have been reported so far. Affected owners will be notified by letter starting June 27th. And FIFA announced that 16 North American cities will host the 2026 World Cup. The games played across the U.S., Mexico, and Canada will have 11 U.S. cities hosting from around the country, including New York, Miami, Los Angeles. Mexico will have 3 host cities, including Mexico City, Guadalajara, and Monterrey. And Canada will have 2 host cities, Toronto and Vancouver. All right, we want to turn now back to the economy and the turmoil in the housing market. Interest rates are skyrocketing. And with the Fed's major rate hike yesterday, they will only be going up more. NBC News is taking an in-depth look at the difficulties in buying a home in our series Priced Out. We have 2 reports, beginning with senior consumer investigative correspondent Vicki Nguyen, who is answering that dilemma. Should you rent or buy?
From Wall Street to Main Street, all eyes are on the Federal Reserve.
Just about everything we buy on credit will get more expensive.
As promised, the Federal Reserve is raising interest rates to tame inflation. But that's only inflaming the hearts of would-be homebuyers. Average 30-year mortgage interest rates now top 5%. That's up from less than 3% a year ago. Meanwhile, home prices continue their meteoric rise, with the median home price nearly $430,000 last quarter.
I was actually considering just getting a cute little single-family starter home.
Demila Epps is a 24-year-old nurse in Atlanta who has been looking to buy a home.
I kind of put myself into a situation where, do I want to buy a house or do I want to just continue renting?
That decision made even tougher because the cost of rent is also going up. Nationwide, 1- and 2-bedroom apartments up more than 25% from a year ago. Demila's rent for her 1-bedroom apartment in Atlanta increased from $1,475 a month to $2,055.
A $600 increase. I just couldn't do that. That's why I put myself into, okay, let me just think about getting a house.
She saved up enough for a 3.5% down payment, about $15,000, but she says she kept getting outbid. So Demila put a pause on her home search.
So Demila, I want to bring in Winnie Sun. She's a financial advisor who's been listening in with us as you've explained your situation. Hey, Winnie.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
So Winnie, what's Demila doing right?
The first foremost, I love the fact that Demila is comfortable talking about her finances. The other thing is she's really focused on what she can afford and not going beyond her budget.
She says Demila was smart to pause her home search, and you should only buy if you have a 20% down payment plus an additional 6% for closing costs. You plan on staying in the same home for at least 5 years, and you have about 6 months' pay in savings for emergency repairs. Those are steep entries for ownership, but she says you can save money while renting. To do so, spend no more than 30% of your income on rent. Negotiate a longer lease, maybe 2 years instead of 1, to lock in your rental rate. Get a roommate to offset increasing rents. And if you have a parking spot or space in a garage, rent it out for extra income. And reduce other major expenses like gas by carpooling, biking, using public transit, or downsizing your vehicle.
You don't need that fancy car right now because our number one financial goal is to get you into the home that you really want.
If you can afford the house of your dreams, don't let the rising rates scare you away.
Right now, the interest rate, although a little bit higher than it was a few years ago, but it's still significantly lower than historical mortgage rates.
Now, because housing is typically our highest monthly expense, financial experts say buying can help you control one of the biggest costs in your budget without being at the whim of a landlord. But renting does give you flexibility, and remember, you generally do not have to pay for your repairs. Back to you.
Okay, Vicki, some good tips here. Now we want to take you to a small town in Indiana where home buyers are losing their dream homes to corporations buying them up just to rent them out. Antonia Hilton has a story of people getting squeezed out.
You're checking out the neighborhood.
For years, John and Angie Collier saved.
Oh, this is nice.
Eager to buy a first home in Fishers, Indiana, attracted by the good schools and proximity to work. But pursuing the American dream has proved daunting.
Oh, sorry, outbid.
Fishers, named by Money magazine one of the best places to live, is part of a national trend as real estate investment groups buy up houses in cash and rent them out, in some cases, to the very families who dreamed of owning them. In January, 33% of all homes purchased in the U.S. were bought by investors, often Wall Street-backed companies with multi-billion-dollar funds. The Colliers currently rent in a town near Fishers from one of the nation's biggest house rental companies. Their rent recently raised 8%.
Good to see you. Come on in.
4 times in recent weeks, they've been outbid by investors with all-cash offers.
It can be, discouraging when you get overbid by, companies.
How do you save when you're spending $2,200 a month just to rent?
So these companies have you on both ends.
Yeah, it's definitely a conundrum.
In some Fishers neighborhoods, investors own more than half of the homes, according to realtor Laura Turner.
This is one of the neighborhoods that investors have really targeted. They're coming in, they're buying it at cash, and then they're going to hold them as rentals.
Fishers Mayor Scott Fadness is frustrated by the surge of distant, faceless landlords.
Have you been able to talk to any of these companies?
It's very difficult. So take, for instance, if you have a high grass and weed issue, a code enforcement issue. I mean, if they own 4,000 homes, who is the individual that you can go talk to about a specific problem?
In a statement, the National Rental Home Council said NRHC member companies own just a fraction of the homes throughout the state of Indiana, and that its 5 largest member companies maintain an A+ rating by the Better Business Bureau. Builder Steve Lanes argues rental companies aren't taking away possibilities from families, but in many cases, creating them.
There are a segment of people who are no longer able to buy a home because they can't afford that home, but they don't want to be in an apartment. They're looking for those opportunities to rent in those communities.
After getting outbid time and again, the Colliers say they've given up on Fishers.
Is the American dream still accessible?
I think the American dream is changing. Our society may be going in that direction where we are getting further away from ownership, but I don't think it's the right direction.
I love the screened-in porch.
They've put in a bid on a home in a town farther out, their American dream modified, not broken. Antonia Hilton, NBC News, Fishers, Indiana.
Okay, we want to turn now to Global Watch and the escalating protests in India. New video shows a train after it was set on fire in the eastern state of Bihar. Thousands of people are protesting across the country over a new short-term military recruitment system. Demonstrations also blocking roads and damaging government buildings. Also, an alarming new report on the ongoing hunger crisis in East Africa. New data from the Save the Children says an estimated 185,000 children in eastern Ethiopia are suffering from severe malnutrition, and the region experiences an unprecedented drought and war. UNICEF says nearly 2 million children across Africa's Horn are now malnourished. The UN also warning 20 million people there could face food insecurity by September. And 3 wildfires are burning in eastern Spain as a record heat wave hits parts of Europe. Take a look. The fires have burned nearly 4,000 acres in the Catalonia region. The flames are threatening farmland. Several homes and a center for children evacuated. So far, there are no reports of any injuries or deaths. Temperatures in the area now reaching 104 degrees. Okay, we want to turn to the Americas and an update on a story we have been following. Brazilian authorities now confirm the bodies of a missing British journalist and his guide have been found. A pair of brothers now accused in their murders. The harrowing news comes after an exhaustive 10-day search across a remote region of the Amazon. NBC's George Solis has been following the story and has more.
Tonight, heartbreak on 2 continents. Hopes of a rescue lost with a murder investigation underway. Brazilian authorities have recovered the bodies of British journalist Dom Phillips and his expert guide, Bruno Pereira.
When you see it, everything becomes real.
Journalist Jan Bouchat was a close friend. We spoke with him today from Brazil.
It's just unbelievable that he was he's gone.
According to Brazilian federal police, it was a confession by fisherman Amarillo de Costa de Oliveira that led them to the men's bodies. The man, nicknamed Polaro, telling police he shot and killed the pair. He is one of 2 men arrested in connection with their murder. Investigators say de Oliveira's brother is also under arrest. The confirmation of the men's death closes a suspenseful 10-day search, one that saw protests across the remote Javari Valley region where the duo's extensive knowledge had earned them the respect of the indigenous groups they dedicated years defending. Tributes flooded social media and publications both in Brazil and the UK. It weighs heavy on our hearts, this nurse says. He used his life in defense of our people and territories.
Unfortunately, they were killed because they were trying to help these people to protect this area.
Philip's family says they aren't ready to speak, but in a statement say they are heartbroken, highlighting the men's passion, writing, "Dom and Bruno both love the Amazon. They heroically put their lives on the line for years to stop criminal loggers, miners, and gangsters from irreparably destroying it for future generations." The pair were in the region researching for a book. Initial search efforts by the Brazilian government and President Jair Bolsonaro drew heavy criticism. Bolsonaro suggesting the men were to blame for their own fate, saying they were on an adventure that was not recommended. Phillips is seen here in 2019 questioning the Brazilian president about the preservation of the Amazon. Jan tells me the men's death makes him feel threatened as well, but he and other journalists will not be deterred.
How do you personally, as their friend, honor their legacy?
Being a reporter, doing what Don will do. Don was a reporter, a very good reporter. He was the kind of reporter that would never, ever be at home. He was the kind of guy that would go inside the jungle. He would come here to feel it, to smell it, to understand the reality here.
All right, George Solis joins us now from Los Angeles. George, now that authorities have made arrests, do they have a motive?
Yeah, no motive as of yet, Tom, but officials do tell us to expect more arrests in the coming days. And we should note that the pair's work really took a look at underscoring some of the illegal fishing and mining and drug trafficking in the area. And an important note that I do want to make, according to the Committee to Protect Journalists, there have been 24 journalists murdered in Brazil in the last 10 years, really underscoring some of the dangerous work out there. Tom?
All right, George, we thank you for all that reporting on this really sad story. Coming up, the fake heiress confronted. Our Savannah Sellers interviewing Anna Sorokin from inside an ICE detention facility. Her response when pressed about those she scammed. That's coming up. We're back now with a rare interview with Anna Sorokin, better known by her alias Anna Delvey and popularized by Netflix's Inventing Anna. Savannah Sellers sitting down with the fake German heiress in an ICE detention center where she's awaiting her possible deportation. What she has to say about her alleged scams and the plans she has for her future. Take a look.
Anna Sorokin, better known by her alias Anna Delvey, and I have a talent for business, was brought to the mainstream by the hit Netflix series Inventing Anna.
Do you feel that you owe anyone an apology?
You mean for what? I'm not a 12-year-old kid to apologize.
Sorokin was accused of trying to scam financial institutions, businesses, and friends out of more than $22 million, ultimately convicted of grand larceny and theft of services, charges amounting to more than $200,000.
So who would I be apologizing to for that?
The banks that you tried to take the money from.
I don't think they care.
Do you think that that was wrong?
Yeah, that was definitely unethical.
She says there was never any malicious intent.
And I'm not just like this vicious, like scamming person trying to like take advantage of anybody who's just like stupid enough to fall for it.
Then how do you square the lifestyle aspect of what people see as the scam? The staying at extremely nice hotels, the shopping.
Staying in a hotel made sense for me because I was traveling so much. I was not staying like in the biggest penthouse.
Her new project, giving buyers access to live streams and phone calls with Sorokin.
Why should someone buy something that you're selling?
I don't even know. That's a good question, but I don't know, because I guess I changed so much.
What does the reinvented Anna look like?
Hopefully I'll be given a chance to like focus all my energy into something legal.
She says her supporters admire her resilience.
There's always a way to turn something bad into something good. Obviously there's a line which should be drawn to like to which methods you should resort while trying to achieve what you want.
Do you think you crossed that line?
Well, the government definitely thinks that way, so.
And what do you think?
Well, my case is still in direct appeal, so I guess I'll take that up in court.
Savannah Sellers, NBC News, New York.
All right, coming up next, we're inside one of the most ambitious museum projects in years, and Top Story has a first look. Why it's going to take 10 years to finish and how they hope to raise $500 million. Stay with us. Finally tonight, an ambitious new project underway in Washington, D.C. Something the country needs, millions of Americans will benefit from. So why is it going to take 10 years to get done? Top Story traveled to the Smithsonian to find out.
You're looking at a first-of-its-kind exhibit at the Smithsonian. Not just artifacts. This is an initial victory in a long battle to build a museum celebrating the American Latino. From the cultural contributions of salsa music, to the Mexican-American heroes of the workers' rights movement, to the vivid risks so many took to come to America.
You look at this and you think, how could somebody cross an ocean in this? But then you think, why would someone cross an ocean in this? It's these pieces, they make you stop and just think.
This object really speaks not just to the Cuban-American story, but also to just immigration stories around the world.
And the struggle for Latinos continues, even with this museum.
What does the financial situation look like right now?
It's a little daunting when you take on a task like this, but it's exciting because the opportunities are there.
Cuban-American Jorge Zamanillo is leading the effort they need to raise $500 million, find a prime D.C. location, and acquire artifacts spanning more than a century.
Do you see any kind of symbolism in trying to get this museum off the ground and sort of the Latino experience in America, essentially coming here, wanting something so bad, starting with nothing?
I do, and that's one of the reasons I took this job. I felt like it was a calling.
That same calling inspiring artists like Veronica Castillo, known for her Tree of Life pieces, all handcrafted from her studio in San Antonio.
Lo que yo quiero que la gente cuando lo vea y diga, por fin nos están haciendo, nos están reconociendo, nos están dando nuestro lugar en este continente, en este país.
Also recognizing this community, Congress, which after years of back and forth, finally appropriated federal funding.
There has to be appropriations language, like there was for African American history and culture, like there was for the American Indian Museum. Once that language was inserted into the final iteration of the bill that passed Congress in December of 2020, then the Smithsonian could feel comfortable that, yes, the federal government has skin in the game.
Recognition and a new museum that will finally fill a void.
And how did you guys do this? You press this button, and immediately you can start smelling Cuban coffee.
Yeah,
how does that work?
Tapping into a lifetime of memories, I'm sure, and that's the idea here.
A home for so many to share those stories, look back, and create that tide to keep pushing forward.
You have millions and millions of Hispanics out there that are sort of relying on you. And I'm looking at you, and I'm thinking, I hope my kids in 10 years, I can bring them to this museum. That's got to be a lot of pressure.
It's a lot of pressure, but what you said is exactly why I do it. Because I want to make sure that our future generations, your kids and my grandkids, will be able to come to D.C. and go to a museum and say, I can't believe my story is being shared here. I can't believe my story is being told. I feel like I'm part of the larger American narrative.
We look forward to that museum breaking ground. Thanks so much for watching Top Story tonight. I'm Tom Llamas in New York. Stay right there. More news on the way.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.